So good morning, everyone. My name is Greg, and I'll be today's minister. Our topic for today is devotion. And as I was thinking about devotion over the last couple of weeks, I remembered a story. And it goes something like this. A German Shepherd, a Doberman, and a cat all died suddenly. And they found themselves sitting before the throne of God. And God said to them, I want to know what you believe in. And he looked at the German Shepherd, and the German Shepherd answered, I believe in strict discipline and devotion to my master. And God was pleased and told the German Shepherd to sit at his right hand. Doberman, what do you believe in? And the Doberman said, I believe in love and kindness and devotion and above all protecting my master. And God said, come and sit on my left hand. And then God said to the cat, what do you believe in? And the cat said, I believe you're sitting in my chair. When I think of devotion, one of the first examples that I ever think of is the example of a dog. Dogs are amazing animals and creatures, and we can learn a lot about devotion by studying a dog. I remember stories I've read where dogs were lost on a vacation, and the family went home, and 3 months later, the dog, a little worn out, arrived at the home after crossing several states to get there. The devotion is that strong to their family. There's a story, and it's a true story, about an Akita dog in Japan by the name of Hachiko. And Hachiko used to go to the train station with his owner every morning, and then he would go back to the train station in the evening and meet his owner there at the train station. Unfortunately, the pattern was broken because one day the owner died suddenly at work. And so the dog was waiting for him at the train station that afternoon, but the owner never showed up. Well, Hachiko showed up at that train station every day at the time the train would arrive for 9.5 years before the dog passed away. That's a true story of devotion. Devotion is loyalty and love for persons, activities, or even ideas. But the devotion we're talking about here today is devotion to Mother, Divine Mother, and our Divine Father. I believe we learn devotion in each of our lifetimes in a process. We start out small and it becomes greater and greater. So as a small child, I remember being devoted to a few things: my pets, my baseball cards, and my bicycle. As a teenager, that developed even stronger, where I became very devoted to family, friends, girlfriends, coaches, teachers. When I stepped on the Sunburst path, I gradually grew in devotion towards our spiritual teacher, Norman Paulson, who founded Sunburst. There are 4 main paths of self-realization in yoga. The first is karma yoga. So karma yoga is the yoga of doing. It's the yoga of activity. And a true karma yogi does not expect a reward, does not expect recognition, expects nothing in return, because a true karma yogi is actually working or doing something for God. I think a great example of a karma yogi would be Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She spent years in the slums of Calcutta helping the poor, the sick, even the lepers. at much expense to her own health and vitality. One day a reporter said that what she and her fellow sisters were doing in Calcutta was never going to make a difference in Calcutta because the problems of poverty and illness were just too much for a handful of women. And Mother Teresa's answer to that was, I'm not a social worker. What I'm doing here is what Jesus asked me to do. She was not working for recognition. She was not working for an earthly or heavenly reward. She was working for her master, who she was devoted to, and doing the things that he would want her to do. That's true karma yoga. The second path is Gyana Yoga. It is the path of wisdom or using intellect to reach self-realization. Probably a great example of that would be the Buddha. The Buddha, through years of self-examination and self-discovery, was able to find for himself a way to freedom. The third path is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti is the path of love and devotion. Today we often think of Bhakti Yoga as in the form of a kirtan or devotional singing or devotional music, but Bhakti is not just that, and it's way more than that. Bhakti is finding your way to self-realization through love and devotion of your Creator. Brother Norm was a very strong example of Bhakti Yoga. And his fellow brothers, when he was at the monastery at Mount Washington, recognized that. One of his brothers was Swami Kriyananda. And he was a monk at Mount Washington the same time that Brother Norm was there. And he described devotion in terms of Norm. He said, not at all interested in the theoretical aspects of the path, Norman understood everything in terms of devotion. God was to him simply his divine friend. I don't know any of these things, he would exclaim with a gentle smile whenever I posed him some philosophical conundrum. I just know that I love God. How I envied him, his childlike devotion. Even Master was touched by it. And the fourth path is what we call Raja Yoga. It's the yoga of the royal path, as it translates. It's the yoga that we practice here at Sunburst. What makes Raja different is it incorporates all three types we've already discussed: karma yoga, Gyana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. But it also, in addition, adds Kriya meditation. And Brother Norm taught us that it was meditation that brought us to the door of the infinite. But it was devotion that allowed us to move through the door and meet our Creator. A modern example of devotion can be found in Sister Gyanamata, who was a disciple of Yogananda from 1927 till her death in 1951. She was one of Yogananda's most devoted disciples. She suffered while she was at SRF from very difficult health problems for nearly 20 years, although she never complained and she never slowed down. When she passed in 1951, Yogananda actually gave the memorial service. And what was interesting about that is Sister Gyana was so close to him that he was brought to tears, and something that his disciples had not seen before, and sobbed as he gave his memorial address. He said in his address, he said, "Dear Lord, you have taken our Sister Gyana, the greatest among women disciples of self-realization. The dewdrop has slipped into the shining sea. But when I looked at her body in the casket, I felt Sister's soul commingled with the omnipresent ether. I heard the voice of Father speaking to me from within. 20 years of suffering never took away her love for me, and that is what I prize in her life." That's a very powerful statement, and that comes from our Divine Father. That the devotion, the love that she had spoke greater than anything else that she'd ever done in her life. Sister Gyana was a letter writer, and while Yogananda was at Mount Washington and she was often in Encinitas, she would write to him there or in India when he traveled to India almost daily. And oftentimes she would give him advice or ideas on how to solve a particular problem. And what was odd about this was Yogananda had not discussed the problem with her. She was so connected to Yogananda that she knew what was going on in her master's life. In one of the letters that she wrote these words: "How shall devotion be stimulated? What fuel shall we use to replenish the fire upon our own altar? The Bhagavad Gita says, the Lord will not reject the smallest offering. A flower or a fruit will do. Ask your heart, it will guide you. Perform regularly whatever act makes devotion burn to heaven in a clear, bright flame. God lures us from one object of desire to another until we understand that it is He Himself that we have been longing for all the time, and in Him our restless hearts find rest." It sounds like Sister Gyana kind of agrees with me as far as the process of devotion, that we start with devotion to small things and it gradually builds, and our goal would be that we've given up all desires except for God. That would be true devotion to God. If you visit Mount Washington today, there's a wishing well between the store and the old hermitage. And around that wishing well is a big concrete barrier. It's round and you can sit on it. And if you look at the bottom of that concrete, you'll see Yogananda's handprints and his footprints that he put in there when they built the wishing well. And you'll also see Sister Gyana handprints and the mottos that she went with through her whole life, and that was God alone. What she meant by that, and I think that you would probably all agree, is that when the path of devotion is completely realized, there's no other desire left but God, God alone. Now we're going to go into a short meditation at this time. And what I'd ask you to do is, if you have a meditation technique, use it. And let the music that's going to play bring you into a place of peace and tranquility. If you don't have a technique, simply close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Watch your inhale and your pause, and then your exhale and your pause. And your eyes will want to gaze or focus at a point, even though they're closed. So focus at a point at about 12 inches out from your spiritual eye, which is right here. And let your eyes focus on that point with your eyes closed. So I've been thinking in my meditations about what some practical ways to help develop devotion faster. And I'd like to share a couple of the ideas that came to me. One was to share your day with Spirit. I had never done that before, and I remember one day when I lived at the farm, driving to meditation in the morning at the ranch, and seeing some poppies that were coming up on the highway, and looking at them and realizing how beautiful they were, and then my heart was filled with gratitude towards God, and then I just started having a conversation. I said, "You did a really great job with poppies. I love the color." And I had this conversation all the way to the ranch. That's spending your day with God. Share your day, share your work, share your play. When you pray to God, or Divine Mother, Divine Father, with words that you would use if you're talking to a friend. Don't try to do the thys and thous and thines, but just make it simple. We're talking to a friend. And eventually you'll feel that friendship. Another way would be in our meditations, when we get to a point where we can actually drop the technique and just float in meditation. That's the time to listen. That's the time to ask a question and then listen. Because it's in those quiet times, the spaces between our thoughts, that God speaks to us. If you're so moved, do true karma yoga. You can do things for other people, you can do things for the community, but in true karma yoga, you're actually doing it for God. It's a form of devotion. And I think the last thing would be to continually read and study the saints who have lived a life that is very close to our path, or our disciples in our lineage of spiritual masters. And read and study and pray and meditate about the things that you learn there. And these are just a couple of simple ways that we can use to increase our level of devotion. A final thought would be, God has everything. The only thing that God is missing is our love. It's our choice to give that devotion to our Divine Father and our Divine Mother.